Hi, I'm Alina Eisenhower, and I'm the executive pastry chef and owner of Sweet in Worcester, Massachusetts. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make meringue mushrooms. You could also use this meringue to make them into little meringue cookies or pavlova, or there's many other uses. The meringue that I'm going to use today is a Swiss meringue, which is one of my favorite meringue recipes because it gives you more stability than a classic meringue, which is just egg whites and sugar that are whipped. So in my bowl here, I have 3 large egg whites at room temperature, and I'm going to set that over a double boiler, and I'm going to add to it all at once a cup of granulated sugar. And before I start cooking this, I'm just going to mix them together really well. We're going to cook this over the double boiler slowly, and it's super important that you are whisking this the entire time. And that's going to keep the heat evenly moving throughout your eggs. What we're trying to do here really is just dissolve the sugar into our egg whites. So the way that I'm going to test this is every once in a while I'm going to feel it between my fingers until it gets to a point where I do not feel any more granules of sugar, and then we know we're ready to go. So it's been about 10 minutes of continuously whisking my egg whites here over our double boiler, and that feels pretty good actually. So I'm just going to take this whisk out, get everything down off my edges, and it's going to go straight onto the mixer. It doesn't cool or anything in between. It will cool as it's whipping. I'm going to put this right on the mixer onto a medium speed. We're going to let this mix until it comes to a stiff peak, glossy, but again not dry because I want to be able to pipe this. So now I have the meringue. It's ready to go off the mixer. It's at a stiff peak, just stiff peak. It's still kind of in between your soft and your stiff because you don't want it to be too stiff, it will break on you. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it into a pastry bag. And I have this bag fitted with a 1/2 inch round tip. You could do it without the tip if you really had to, but it's much easier when you have a metal tip in it. It's easier for piping consistency and to get the shapes that you want to get. Just going to take the bag here and fill it up. Another tip with piping, especially if you're not super experienced at it, is to not overfill your bag. The amount that we have here in this recipe is probably okay to get it all in the bag, because I get it all over myself. And I'm just going to force it down to the end of the bag. I always squeeze a little bit out first just to make sure there's no air bubbles. I feel like there still might be, but we'll work around that. So I'm going to start first by piping my stems, and I have here just a regular sheet pan with parchment paper, not greased or buttered in any way. And I'm just going to start, and for your stems you just want to draw up slowly to a point. And make them different sizes. They don't have to all be the same. It's okay if they start to fall over a little bit. That makes them look more realistic and more natural, because mushrooms are definitely not perfect in nature. They're a little funky and bumpy and crooked sometimes. And now I'm going to move on to doing the mushroom caps. For the caps, again, you have a little bit of flexibility. You can make flat ones, you can make tall, round ones, a little bit pointy. Just give yourself some variety. So I'm going to make this one tall, and maybe make one that's a little bit fatter. A little flat one. I like the ones that are a little bit more like caps. When you're squeezing it out, if you're trying to get it, if you don't want the rings and you want a really even dome, the trick is to really apply even pressure as you squeeze. So I'm just going to finish piping out a few more, and then we're going to let this sit for a minute and go ahead and grab some water and smooth them out before we put them in the oven. So now I have a dish with a little bit of water. You can use a spoon, you could use your finger. I prefer to use my finger because I can actually really feel what I'm doing. So I'm just getting a little bit of water on my finger, and then it will just smooth out, absolutely. And I smooth the points out a little bit because it's going to be easier to get that to fit into the mushroom. If it's too pointy, it might break on you. It works perfectly. This is a good little trick to know for any kind of meringue you're making, because you can smooth out the whole top. I mean, if I want to take it a step further, I can actually go down here and even smooth out some of the rings in that. Make it a little bit bumpy like a mushroom. So I'm going to continue doing this to the rest of my mushrooms, and these are going to go into the oven at 200 to 225 degrees depending on your oven. Always err on the side of a little bit lower temperature and then leave them in there for longer. If they go in at too high of a temperature, you're going to change the color too drastically. They are going to slightly turn to an off-white brown a little bit, but you want it really even. You don't want them to be brown or golden brown like a cookie, so you need to keep a low temp. So they're going to go into the oven for about an hour and a half. And then you're going to turn your oven off and jar the door open slightly and leave them in there for another hour to continue drying out. Here I have our meringues that have come out of the oven, and they're nice and dry. As you can tell, some of them are flat, some of them are rounded, and I have all my kind of miscellaneous bottoms here. And they're not supposed to go with anything specific, you just mix and match. So what I'm going to do is you're going to take your meringue and a sharp knife, you want something with a good little point on it, and you're going to make a hole in the bottom. You kind of want to go carefully because you don't want to crack them. They're fairly sturdy. I'm just going to stick it in, I kind of twist it around a little bit and shave out a little bit of that inside. And this is just to make it stick a little bit better than if we were just using our ganache or frosting. So I'm going to take a little bit of chocolate ganache. You could use frosting if you have that around, whatever you have, just to make the bottom stick. And then I'm going to find a bottom small top, so I'll pick a small bottom. I'm just going to stick the point right into where I made that hole, and that's going to give me a little mushroom. And I'm going to continue on with the rest of these. So here we have our meringue mushrooms. You can leave them just as they are like this. You could also take a little bit of chocolate and make some spots on them. You could take some cinnamon or cocoa powder and dust the tops, again, just to make them look like different varieties of mushrooms or give them a little bit of variation in color. And there you have meringue mushrooms.